Jacob Endrell, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I know that you yourself are a banker, so you probably have really good insight into this topic. Jacob, feel free to bust me up on this one. I'm really wanting your critical feedback. But I see a need here in the United States, and essentially it's this. Millennials have an absolute deficiency relative to their financial education and literacy. They don't understand the stock market, they don't understand saving, they don't understand cash flow and loans, even simple stuff like compound interest. We're blasting them with STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, history, literary arts even. But there's just a total lack in high school, college education on kind of personal finance and how to do life financially. I see an opportunity for there to be a type of consultant, financial coach, helper, collaborator to not only advise them and kind of handhold them, but also to educate them, to come alongside them, to help unlock some of the creative juices and just simple mastery of financial concepts. So that's kind of what I see as an opportunity, and that's why. So my first question for you is, do you feel like this is a need? And if so, what's the exact nature of this need?
I think it certainly is a need. I think that, looking at my own friends and people that I grew up with, there's very different personal philosophies on finance. I have friends who took out a bunch of loans and credit cards, and with all in the name of expected future income. And then I have a friend who's very staunch Dave Ramsey follower who I suppose worse things could happen to someone. But and then there's people in my own family who you just sort of get by and pay for things as they come, but there's never any real planning done for the future. And I think that a lot of people don't realize the advantage they have being young. They have time on their side, the opportunity for compound interest, and if they knew what actionable steps they could start taking, and if they saw the value in small steps made consistently. Baby steps, because when you look at wealth is something that when you look at it in a big picture, it could be intimidating. And so I think if there was a coach that outlined a plan and started educating young people earlier, and showing them the right things to do, and then help them implement those, I think that could certainly be of value. Yes, and I think there is a deficiency there. Absolutely.
Okay, so now millennials, because this is the topic, millennials, financial education, ramping them up, coming alongside them, and there being a market there. When do millennials become aware of this need for the financial education that we're kind of talking about as a potential way of, really getting in their pocketbook, but also helping them? So when do they become aware of that need, and are they experiencing this need frequently, noticing it sometimes, or ubiquitously throughout their life going, shoot, I'm screwed?
I think people notice it differently depending on how early they are financially independent, or financially, how early their parents, kind of kick them out of the nest. And so it's certainly out of necessity, and I think people realize when they come up short and can't pay bills, and they're tired of being stressed about money and not being able to do what they want to do. I think that's when they kind of see the need. But also I think there's a lot of people who don't necessarily identify it as a need for financial education. They just think they need more money. But in reality, their spending habits are horrible, and they don't have the right view of money. And so I think it just depends on when they get kicked out of their parents.
That's a funny way of putting it, but I don't think you're wrong. So the next to last question I have is, how long has this need existed kind of for the younger generation? Think Gen Xers, at the same age as you are, boomers at the same age as you are. How long has this need existed, and do you feel like it's worse now? That's it.
I think the need has existed. I mean, I think the need's always there. You can never start being financially educated early enough. But I think with pensions going away, and a lot of those different, there's not going to be so many resources for people, millennials to turn to when they eventually retire.
They're falling back on their savings,
and
basically.
So they need to be able to provide that for themselves. And at this point, a lot of millennials, are caught up in the game of instant gratification and getting an experience, traveling, social media, getting the shoes that their friends have, whatever.
Yes.
And so they're not as concerned about building, a nest egg for 40 years down the road when they're going to want to be retiring. And so I think that, a wake-up call, a financial coach, someone to help them be accountable, someone to help start taking those baby steps, and act in a way, start building those habits early on. I think that's definitely a need, and I think that millennials need to understand that there are a lot of problems with how we view money in our generation, especially with social media.
All right, so my final question for you is, how do you think millennials are currently addressing this need, this deficiency, and are they satisfied with the way they're doing it, if they are?
I don't know that it is being met. I looking around in my own friend groups, I think that people realize like I said, they're coming up short. They can't, afford to pay for stuff, but that doesn't necessarily change their habits. It doesn't necessarily change how they view money or, the decisions they make with money. They kind of, keep all the same inputs and hope for different output, and that doesn't necessarily work.
Right. Well, Jacob, I can't thank you enough for your time. Your time is very valuable. I really appreciate you doing this, making the time, making the effort to converse with me about this topic, and I wish you the very best, and thank you, sir.
Thanks. Upload it.
So, really interesting interview with Jacob. He kind of he touched on a couple of things that I point out in my last commentary with the second interview with Daniel. He seemed to buy into it too. I'm actually surprised at the amount of cohesiveness and consistency I'm kind of seeing as takeaways from these three interviews, but what I'm seeing from Jacob specifically is that there's a need. People are blowing money or not managing it the right way, and they're not doing a whole lot about it, and that they're open-minded, they're willing to pivot from that. All it's going to take is those baby steps. So really, really interesting interview. Nor Daniel brought up the kind of education piece being on your own after college. But an interesting insight from Asher nonetheless. It might be worth interviewing a couple other people to see if they come up with Asher's same idea.